The room is 85 degrees. The windows are shut. The thermostat has been adjusted deliberately to the temperature of discomfort. The air smells like sweat, dried blood, and the sour tang of exertion pushed past what most human bodies are designed to sustain. 30 wrestlers are on the mat. They have been wrestling live, full contact, for an hour and 45 minutes. Some of them are bleeding from mat burns on their knees and elbows. All of them are soaked through in sweat. And in the center of the room, a man with destroyed hips and an Olympic gold medal is wrestling with them. He is 30 years old. He is the head coach, and he is going harder than anyone else in the room. His name is Dan Gable. This is the University of Iowa wrestling room, and you are looking at the factory floor where the most dominant dynasty in college sports is being manufactured, one brutal practice at a time. 1976. Dan Gable is named head coach of the University of Iowa wrestling program. He is 27 years old. He has spent 4 years as an assistant, watching, studying, and seething. He has observed a program that considers itself competitive and concluded that it is, by the only standard that matters to him: mediocre. The Gatorade parties are over. The casual attitude is dead. What replaces it is something that college wrestling world has never seen. The first thing Gable changes is practice itself, not just the intensity, the architecture. Other programs across the country follow a few simple standards and a simple template. They dedicate the majority of practice time to drilling technique. 60 minutes, sometimes 90, of repetitive technique work. Takedowns, escapes, turns, transitions. The wrestlers drill in pairs, working through sequences at moderate intensity, perfecting the mechanics of each position. Then at the end of practice, they wrestle live for 20 or 30 minutes. The logic is straightforward: perfect technique first, then apply it to pressure. Gable flips this completely. His wrestlers drill technique for maybe 20 minutes. The remaining 2 hours are live wrestling, full speed, full contact, match conditions, every single rep. You cannot simulate a match by drilling a technique in isolation. A drill teaches you the move, but a match teaches you when to use the move, how to set it up, how to recover when it fails, and how to keep going when your lungs are burning and your legs are dead and your opponent is still trying to rip your head off. The only way to learn those things is to do them repeatedly, under pressure, against partners who are trying to do the same thing to you. The second thing Gable changes is rest. He removes it. Practice runs 2.5 hours every day. There are no scheduled breaks. There is no water station at the edge of the mat. There is no casual conversation. You step into the Iowa wrestling room, and you wrestle until Gable says stop. And Gable never says stop early. Gable does not want a full room full of stars. He wants a room full of killers. Every position on the roster has a backup who is nearly as good as the starter, because the competition in practice needs to be as fierce as the competition in matches. If your practice partner is not trying to beat you, then you're not preparing. Gable recruits 2 and sometimes 3 wrestlers per weight class, deliberately creating internal competition so brutal that the NCAA tournament, when it finally arrives, feels like a relief. And the wrestlers he recruits become legends. Ed Banach and Lou Banach, twin brothers from Port Jarvis, New York, arrive in Iowa City in 1979, looking like they were engineered in a wrestling laboratory. They were powerful, they are mean, and they feed off of each other's intensity the way twin flames feed off shared heat. In 1983, they do something no pair of brothers has done before or since. They both win NCAA individual championships in the same year. Ed wins at 190, Lou wins the heavyweight title. The same night in the same arena, their mother, in the stands, watches both sons raise their arms in victory within hours of each other. Barry Davis, a 118-pounder from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who embodies the Iowa spirit more completely than wrestlers twice his size. Davis is listed at 5'4" and fights like a jackhammer strapped to a rocket. He wins 3 Big Ten titles, 2 NCAA titles, and competes in the 1984 Olympics. When larger opponents try to use their weight advantage against him, Davis turns it into a liability, ducking under their attacks and driving through their legs with a ferocity that makes the size difference. Calls Davis one of the toughest athletes he has ever coached. Coming from Gable, that isn't just praise. That is a geological classification. Randy Lewis, a 135-pounder from Rapid City, South Dakota, whose feet are so fast that opponents sometimes look like they are wrestling a different speed of film. Lewis wins 2 NCAA titles at Iowa, and then in 1984 wins Olympic gold in Los Angeles at 136.5 pounds. He is the prototype Iowa wrestler, technically sound, relentlessly conditioned, mentally composed under pressure, and utterly allergic to losing. And Gable himself gets on the mat. This is the detail that separates him from every other coach of his era. He does not stand on the sideline with a clipboard. He steps into the circle and wrestles with his athletes. The Iowa wrestling room in the late 1970s and early 1980s is a specific place with a specific atmosphere. And the wrestlers who trained there describe it with the precision of soldiers describing a battlefield. The room is on the second floor of the Iowa Fieldhouse. The ceiling is low. The ventilation is poor, by design. Gable keeps the windows closed and the heat turned up because he wants the room to be uncomfortable. Comfortable rooms produce comfortable wrestlers, and comfortable wrestlers lose in March. The mat is yellow, bright institutional yellow, the color of a warning sign. It covers most of the floor wall to wall, leaving only narrow strips of concrete at the edges. A metal balcony runs along one wall, and 12 feet above the mat, sometimes, during practice, Gable climbs up upon the balcony and watches from above. The wrestlers who cannot see his face in the shadows wrestle harder when he is up there. They can feel his eyes. Some of them later say that the sound of Gable's footsteps on the metal balcony was the most motivating and most terrifying sound in the entire room. The signature drill is called King of the Hill. 2 wrestlers start in the center. They wrestle live, full speed, until one scores a takedown or forces the other off the mat. The winner stays. The loser goes to the back of the line. A new challenger steps in. This continues for 30, 40, sometimes 50 minutes. The wrestler who survives the longest earns the right to stay in the middle, earning the title of king. But the king never rests. Every new challenger is fresh. The king is accumulating fatigue with every round. Eventually, the king falls, and the next king rises. The impermanence of dominance. No matter how good you are, someone is coming. There is a story that multiple Iowa wrestlers tell, with minor variation, about Gable in the practice room. It goes like this. A freshman, new to the program, is struggling during live wrestling. His intensity has dropped. His shot attempts are half-hearted. He is going through the motions the way people go through the motions when they are saving energy for later. Gable sees it. He doesn't yell. He doesn't lecture. He walks onto the mat, taps the freshman's partner on the shoulder, and says, "I've got this one." For the next 6 minutes, the Olympic gold medalist, a man who has not lost a wrestling match in over a decade, wrestles the freshman at full intensity. Full, competitive, I am trying to pin you intensity. The freshman is overwhelmed. He is thrown, he is ridden, he is turned, he taps out twice, and both times Gable tells him to get back up. The entire room stops to watch, because when Gable wrestles, the room always stops. When it is over, Gable helps the freshman to his feet and puts a hand on his shoulder and says quietly, "That's the pace. Every single day." The message is clear. The head coach does the work every day in front of everyone. And if the Olympic champion is willing to bleed on this mat, what excuse could any wrestler in the room possibly have for holding back? Then there is the box. The box is not a physical structure. It is a concept that lives in the corner of the Iowa wrestling room, a space, a zone. When a wrestler underperforms, when he dogs a drill, when his effort drops below the standard, Gable sends him to the box. The wrestler sits down. He watches practice continue. He does not participate. He watches his teammates grind and sweat and bleed while he sits and does nothing. The punishment is not physical. That is what makes it devastating. In a room full of men who define themselves entirely by their work ethic, being forced to sit idle is not rest. It is exile. It is public declaration that says, right now, in this moment, you are not one of us. You have not earned the right to be on this mat. You are watching from the outside while the real wrestlers work. Most wrestlers last one trip to the box. They come back and they never give less than everything ever again. Gable is fine with that. He does not want wrestlers who need to be motivated by fear of embarrassment. He wants wrestlers who are self-motivated, who burn from the inside, and who only need to be pointed in the right direction and then unleashed. Pardon the brief interruption. Thank you so much for listening to MindFit Sports Wars. Really quick, I don't run any ads on this podcast. The only way that the show grows is if you share it. So if you enjoy this, please share this with any coaches or athletes that you think might also enjoy the show. Now back to Sports Wars. (1978), Gable's second full year as head coach. Iowa enters the NCAA tournament as a contender, but not the favorite. Oklahoma State holds that title. Iowa State, Gable's alma mater, is strong. The bracket is loaded. Iowa wins, not by a slim margin, by a margin that announces in unmistakable terms that something has changed in college wrestling. The Hawkeyes qualify wrestlers at nearly every weight class. They score points in bunches. They win matches they are expected to lose. The practice room, the endless hours of live wrestling, the refusal of rest, all of it translates into one tournament. All of it translates onto the tournament mat in a way that is visible to everyone watching. Iowa's wrestlers do not fade in the third period. They accelerate. They do not tighten up in close matches. They loosen. They have been under more pressure in practice than anything the tournament can generate. And the result is a team that competes as if the outcome has already been decided, and they are simply executing the remaining steps. And in the team standings, when the final session ends, Iowa sits on top. Gable does not celebrate. He starts planning for 1979. Then 1979, 1980, 1981, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86. 9 consecutive NCAA team championships. 15 consecutive Big Ten titles. The numbers are absurd. No program in any sport has matched the sustained dominance of Gable's Iowa Hawkeyes during this stretch. Not John Wooden's UCLA basketball, not Alabama football under any of its legendary coaches. Nobody. 9 consecutive national championships in a sport with dozens of competitive programs, each fielding full rosters, each training year-round for 9 years, Iowa was so much better than everyone else. The 1983 and 1984 seasons represent the peak. Those 2 years, the Iowa wrestling team wins the NCAA championship by the largest margin in the tournament's history. The point differentials are not close results that could have gone either way. They are blowouts. The Hawkeyes do not just have the best wrestler at one weight class. They have All-Americans at 5, 6, 7 weight classes simultaneously. The depth is unfathomable. Iowa defeats Big Ten opponents by 30 to 40 points. Conference duels that are supposed to be competitive end in an equivalent of a shutout. Opposing coaches game plan for Iowa the way that chess masters game plan against a computer. And the rivalry that defines this era is Iowa versus Oklahoma State. The Cowboys, Gallagher's program, the original dynasty, they hate Iowa. They hate what Gable has done to the balance of power. They hate the arrogance, the intensity, the relentlessness. The dual meets between Iowa and Oklahoma State in the 1980s are wars, sold-out arenas with crowds so loud that coaches on the sidelines have to use hand signals because voice commands disappear in the noise. These duels often determine the number 1 ranking in the country. Orange fills every seat. The noise starts during warm-ups and never drops below a roar. Oklahoma State's wrestlers, bred in the Gallagher's traditions of technical precision and chain wrestling, bring a contrasting style to the mat. They are methodical, where Iowa is manic. They are patient, where Iowa is relentless. The matches between the two programs are collisions between philosophies, between the sport's past and its present. And year after year, Iowa wins. Not always, not easily, but often enough, and decisively enough that the Cowboys, the program that invented college wrestling dominance, find themselves looking up at Iowa City. What makes it work is not just talent or intensity, it is process. And this is where Gable's genius, perhaps unintentionally, aligns with something sports psychologists would later formalize into rigorous research. In the MindFit method, it describes the difference between process goals and outcome goals. An outcome goal says, win the national championship. A process goal says, execute 6 takedowns per match, maintain pace for all 7 minutes, win the third period. Research shows that process goals are 15 times more effective than outcome goals at improving performance. The effect size is not subtle. Gable does not talk about winning. Gable talks about preparation. He talks about reps. He talks about what happened in the practice room today, not what will happen at the tournament next month. His wrestlers hear the same message, stated in different words over and over. If you prepare correctly, the winning takes care of itself. Do not think about the scoreboard. Think about the next shot, the next position, the next 2 seconds. This is Gable's next shot philosophy, and it saturates every corner of the Iowa program. In practice, wrestlers are not told to win the drill. They are told to execute the next technique. In matches, Gable's corner instructions are not strategic overviews on the next 3 seconds of action. Inside tie, get the angle, now shoot. Not, you need 5 points in the third period. There is only the present action, and the discipline to execute it without contaminating it with thoughts about outcome. The MindFit method also describes focus and attention control. It uses the metaphor of a light bulb versus a laser. A light bulb sprays light in every direction, illuminating a wide area, but with low intensity. A laser concentrates all of its energy into a single point, and that concentration gives it the power to cut through steel. Gable's practice structure is a laser factory. Every drill, every live session, every rep is designed to train a wrestler's attention to narrow down to the next 2 seconds. What happened 10 seconds ago is irrelevant. What might happen 30 seconds from now does not exist. There is only this moment, this grip, this angle, this shot. The wrestlers who internalize this focus become almost impossible to rattle in competition. When they fall behind on the scoreboard, they don't panic because they are not looking at the scoreboard. When they give up a takedown, they don't spiral because the takedown is already in the past, and the past does not exist. The MindFit method also describes the destiny chain. Thoughts lead to feelings, to behavior to habit, and habit to identity. This is the invisible architecture underneath Iowa's dynasty. The thought, I will outwork everyone in the room. The feeling, effort is the only thing I fully control. The behavior, relentless training, maximum intensity, no shortcuts. And the habit, a daily rhythm of preparation that does not bend for fatigue, emotion, or convenience. And the identity, I am the hardest worker in the room, and the hardest worker always wins. The dynasty is not built on talent. Iowa wins because its habits are better, because the chain for daily thought to daily action to forming your identity is better than everybody else's. Better habits produce an identity that once it's installed is nearly impossible to shake. But there is a shadow side to process obsession. The same relentless focus that builds the dynasty also consumes the man who built it. What is this shadow? Gable's body is deteriorating. Now in the late 80s and the 90s, the damage announces itself with every step. His hips are the worst. Years of wrestling, thousands of hours in the low squatting stance that the sport requires have ground the cartilage in his hip joints down to nothing. He is walking on bone against bone. Every stride sends a jolt of pain through his pelvis that most people would find debilitating. Gable does not find it debilitating. He finds it inconvenient, which, in Gable's lexicon, is the same as irrelevant. He keeps coaching and he keeps getting on the mat. Then the knees go. The cartilage, already thin from decades of abuse, tears and frays and finally disappears. His knees grind with every step. His shoulders, his rotator cuff tears. That would end most athletic careers, but is treated like minor setbacks. Patched with surgery and ignored during recovery. Doctors tell him to slow down. Physical therapists outline recovery timelines that stretch into months. Gable ignores them. He is back on the mat before the stitches dissolve. His first full hip replacement comes in the early 1990s. The surgery is supposed to give him relief. It does for a time. Then the replacement wears down faster than the surgeon expected, because Gable will not stop moving. He gets a revision, then the other hip, then both knees, then the shoulder, then the rotator cuff that has been quietly shredding for years. By the mid-1990s, his medical chart reads like a demolition report. He has more titanium in his body than some bicycles. He accumulates surgical scars the way other men accumulate vacation photographs. Each operation takes something from him that he cannot get back. Not just cartilage and bone, capability. The ability to demonstrate a technique. The ability to drop into a wrestling stance to show a freshman what a shot is supposed to look like. The ability to walk onto the mat and, without saying a word, communicate through his body that the standard in the room is set by a man who has earned the right to set it. There is a specific cruelty in this for a man like Gable. Most people lose their physical abilities gradually, over decades, in the natural arc of aging. Gable loses it violently, prematurely, because he spent those abilities the way a man spends a fortune on a single cause. He invested every ounce of physical capacity he had into wrestling. The returns were extraordinary, but the account is empty now, and he's only in his 40s. The competitive landscape is shifting too. By the mid 1990s, the rest of college wrestling has spent 2 decades studying Gable's Iowa and trying to close the gap. Oklahoma State is resurgent under head coach John Smith. Smith is a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, one of the most technically gifted wrestlers in history. And he brings a legitimacy to Stillwater that energizes recruiting and reinvigorates the program that has been living in Iowa's shadow. The Cowboys start winning titles again. They start beating Iowa in dual meets. Penn State, under a young coach named Rich Lorenzo, is beginning what will eventually become the next great dynasty. The talent pool is spreading as more high schools invest into wrestling, and the best recruits no longer feel obligated to go to Iowa City just because it's Iowa City. And Gable's body is failing him visibly now. The man who once could get a complete workout in 10 minutes, whose intensity during practice made Olympic gold feel like a warm-up, he can barely walk across the practice room without grimacing. He compensates. He coaches from the side. He yells instructions instead of demonstrating. He sends assistant coaches onto the mat to show the technique. He can see in his mind, but can no longer execute with his body. But the wrestlers can see the change, and the energy in the room shifts, subtly at first, and then more noticeably later. Gable is trying to demonstrate a hip toss. He sets up the position, plants his feet, and begins to rotate. His hip locks. Pain shoots through his lower body. He stops mid-technique, frozen in the loading position, unable to complete the throw. The room goes quiet. Not the intense quiet of focused training, the uncomfortable quiet of watching someone struggle with something that used to be effortless. Gable releases his partner, straightens up, and walks to the edge of the mat and sits down. The wrestlers go back to drilling, but something has left the room. The coach who led by example, whose body was the living argument of everything he demanded, can no longer provide the example. The argument is still true, the standard is still right, but the evidence has changed from present tense to past tense. And in a room full of young men who need to see it to believe it, past tense is not enough. The deeper crisis is identity. And this is one of the most important psychological concepts in all of sport. Identity foreclosure is the condition in which a person's entire sense of self is fused with a single role. When the only thing you are is a wrestler, then losing the ability to wrestle feels like dying. Not metaphorically, it feels like annihilation, because there is no self outside of the role. There is only wrestling. Gable has been wrestling or coaching wrestling since he was 6 years old. Before the murder, before the Owings loss, before the Olympics, before Iowa, wrestling has been the organizing principle of his existence for over 4 decades. It is the language he speaks, the lens through which he sees the world, the identity that replaced the boy who lost his sister in the house in Waterloo. Without it, who is he? The question is more terrifying than any opponent he has ever faced on the mat, because there is no technique for answering it. There is no drill, there is no practice. In 1997, after 21 seasons as head coach, Dan Gable steps down. His record is almost impossible to comprehend. 15 NCAA team championships as a competitor and coach combined. 355 wins, 21 losses, and 5 ties in dual meets as a head coach. An Olympic gold medal earned without surrendering a single point. He is, by any measure, the most accomplished figure in the history of American wrestling. Gable receives the recognition that he deserves and more. But he walks away from the program he built, and the sport he helped shape is about to face its darkest hour. Because the culture of toughness that built this dynasty, the culture that said pain is weakness and suffering is preparation, has been brewing something toxic underneath the surface, and the bill is about to come due. Picture a high school wrestling room in small town Indiana, November 1997. Official competition is weeks away, but the wrestlers are already cutting weight. Because in wrestling, cutting weight is not preparation for the season, it is the season. A sophomore, 15 years old, stands on a scale in his underwear at 6 in the morning. He weighs 138 pounds. His coach wants him at 125, 13 pounds. The sophomore has 3 weeks. His coach hands him a rubber suit, the kind that traps his body heat and forces the body to sweat itself dry. Wear this during practice, the coach says, and nothing but water after 6 p.m. This scene is happening in thousands of wrestling rooms across the country. High school coaches who grew up watching Iowa dominate, who attended Gable's camps and clinics, who modeled their programs on the toughness culture that produced 9 straight championships, are teaching 14 and 15-year-old boys to cut weight the same way college athletes do. Rubber suits, saunas, stationary bikes in overheated rooms, spitting into cups to shed ounces, refusing food and water for days before weigh-ins. If Iowa does it, and Iowa wins 9 straight championships, then it must work. If the best wrestlers in the country cut weight this aggressively, then our wrestlers should too. If toughness means enduring suffering, then the more suffering you endure, the tougher you are. Nobody in this chain of logic stops to ask the question that matters. At what point does the suffering become dangerous? At what point does the body's tolerance for dehydration, caloric restriction, and thermal stress cross the line from difficult to lethal? The answer, it turns out, is a line so thin that the athletes who cross it do not know they have crossed it until their bodies shut down. The physiology is straightforward and terrifying. A wrestler cutting weight through dehydration loses plasma volume. His blood thickens. His electrolyte balance shifts. Potassium, sodium, and magnesium, the minerals that regulate cardiac rhythm, fall out of proportion. The heart encounters a chemical environment it was not designed to handle. In some cases, rarely, but not never, the heart misfires. It fibrillates and stops. The 1997 college wrestling season is underway at campuses across the country. Preseason training has begun. Wrestlers are cutting weight the same way they always have, the way generations before them did, the way the culture says they must. The coaches look the other way. Some supervise the cuts, timing the sauna sessions, monitoring the scale, treating the wrestler's body like a piece of equipment that needs to hit a certain spec before competition. The culture says this is necessary. That the wrestler who can endure the most physical suffering before the match even starts has already won the psychological battle. Nobody is paying attention to the warning signs. Nobody is asking whether these practices are safe because the culture has already answered that question. The answer is safe doesn't matter. Toughness matters. And toughness means doing what others will not. And then, on November 7th, 1997, a wrestler at Campbell University in North Carolina climbs onto a stationary bike before dawn. He is wearing his rubber suit. The room is warm. He has been restricting food and water for days. His body dehydrated beyond what his cardiovascular system can sustain. Sends signals that his conscious mind overrides. Dizziness, tunnel vision, a heartbeat that stutters, skips, then accelerates to the rate that no training effect could stop. His heart stops. His name is Billy Saylor. He is 19 years old. 14 days later, on November 21st, a wrestler at the University of Wisconsin, La Croix, is cutting weight using the same methods. His name is Joseph La Rosa. He is 22 years old. His heart stops too. 18 days after that, A wrestler at the University of Michigan. His name, Jeff Reese. He is 21 years old. He was trying to drop from 150 pounds to 135. 15 pounds in a rubber suit in a room where the temperature has been raised to accelerate sweating. He dies. 3 wrestlers, 3 universities, 33 days. The sport of wrestling will never be the same. And the practices that killed Bill Saylor, Joseph La Rosa, and Jeff Reese are not exotic. They are standard operating procedure. They are the same methods used in thousands of wrestling rooms across the country, from Division I programs to middle school gyms, because the culture of toughness normalized it. The CDC publishes its report in 1997 on December 19th. The language is clinical. The conclusions are damning. 3 previously healthy young men, athletes in peak physical condition, died from cardiac arrest caused by rapid weight loss, methods that were at the time legal, widespread, and culturally endorsed by the sport they loved. It describes the system, a culture, a set of practices so deeply embedded in a sport's identity that questioning them had become the equivalent of questioning the sport itself. The machine that Dan Gable built was designed to forge champions, and it did. Hundreds of All-Americans, Olympic gold medalists, a legacy that will be debated and admired for as long as wrestling exists. But the heat from that forge spread beyond Iowa City, beyond the college level, beyond the athletes physically mature enough to endure it. It spread to boys, to teenagers, to bodies that were still growing, developing, still years away from physical maturity that might have allowed them to survive what the culture demanded of them. And now, some are dead. Families are destroyed. Futures erased. And a sport that built its identity on toughness is about to learn that toughness without wisdom is not strength. It is recklessness. And recklessness kills. Next time, the 3 deaths that shook college wrestling to its foundation, the rule changes that transformed the sport forever, and out of the wreckage, a freshman at Iowa State who will do something no one in history has ever done. He will go 4 years without losing a single match. His name is Cael Sanderson.